Welcome back. In our country, you often hear that race relations take, as I said, 2 steps forward and then 1 step back. But under this administration, only a year, the question is it all backsliding? Now, time and time again, it has done things to reverse what the predecessor, President Obama, did, and that has been to the detriment overwhelmingly of African Americans in particular. Let's start with one of our most fundamental rights, the right to vote. The Justice Department is gutting its Civil Rights Division. Those are the folks that protect Americans from discrimination when it comes to the voting booths as well as everywhere else. Plus, more than 90% of the president's federal judge picks are white. President Obama, he was the first sitting president to visit a federal prison, part of his push to end the era of mass incarceration, disproportionately putting black men behind bars. Attorney General Jeff Sessions now, though, he's reversed all of that by directing prosecutors to pursue the harshest sentences possible for drug crimes, even nonviolent ones. Under Sessions, Justice Department has also rolled back government oversight and investigation of troubled police departments. You don't need me to tell you about the tensions we've seen between officers and communities of color in places like Baltimore, Ferguson, Chicago, the list goes on. Then there's public housing. President Trump's budget, it would cut $6 billion from the Department of Housing and Urban Development that provides subsidized housing to 4 million African American people. And I can go on and on here. Medicaid, Medicare, every entitlement program, they want either drug test or worse for the folks here who get some of the basic services. What troubles you the most? I gave a laundry list here, but to me, I think that's the underreported portion of this. They talk about the crazy comments and everything else, but there's policies or gutting of programs that disproportionately affect the bottom half of this country.
So as a person who's pretty much spent her career focusing on justice issues and politics, I think what we've seen with respect to justice issues are the things that are most troubling at a time when we should be really working to bring community and police closer together. The policies that this Justice Department is espousing is not helping that at all. It's getting rid of accountability on every level and saying, oh, we're going to leave it to local officials who obviously are having their own challenges. So it's disheartening for me. You know, I had the opportunity to work in a Justice Department where you had Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch, and to see all of the work that they've put in and all of those gains being eroded, it's disheartening. But I don't want to say that we should lose hope, because what I think is happening is all of these attacks on justice at every level is actually galvanizing people and bringing them together. So in some ways, this might be our new modern day civil rights movement, but it's just going to take everyone working together to push back against it all.
You know, Chief, what troubles me more than anything is we've been lucky that in the past year, we have not had a Ferguson. We have not had Freddie Gray or some of the high-profile cases. And I worry and there's an inevitability that there'll be a case like that. How will that be handled? And will the temperature be ratcheted up instead of tempered down with not only this president, but also his administration, Jeff Sessions notably? It's amazing how much has changed just in a year in terms of the policies of the prior administration to this one.
Right. Well, you know, I try to look at every issue, look at it very fair, right? You have an opinion, and I may not agree with your opinion, but I'm going to give it some thought. And Jeff Sessions, and all due respect to the president, they have the right to come in, analyze previous policies, and decide they're going to change. President Obama did it, President Clinton did it, General Bush did it. I just would like to understand that the reversal of some of the policies, what exactly is your basis for it, and how could it improve? So when you say that I'm going to cut $6 billion from federal housing, if you're telling me that there was a waste there, and that until the states or the cities realize not to do waste, we want to put in different measures and metrics so that we can make sure we can correct that because we can get the same job done for $4 billion, well, you can't argue with that. But it seems like, and maybe it's the media reporting, or maybe it's the lack of the White House getting that message out. I would like to know exactly what is your point and how do you look to improve it? Because it's pushed to the people like we really don't care about helping anybody. You know, you're on it for your own, and we're going to take this particular money away. And then I'd like to know, where's that particular money going? Where's it going, and what particular program is it going to? So there's a lot of questions that have to be answered on the surface. We could be in for some perilous times, but I'd like to give the president, and he is the president, I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt. He seems to kick it back every opportunity he can to be able to explain some of his policies, because maybe in the madness there's some sense. I haven't been able to make out, but I like to think that there's a sliver of hope. Doubtfully, but maybe so.
You know, Dominic, you've talked openly about being a child of the projects, and one of the things that we don't even talk about, for example, CHIP. I mean, who thinks a program that get health care for little kids, right, to put that as a chopping block, as a leverage point to get, whether it be tax cuts or whatever else, was on the table. Now the proposals that we've talked about in the program for Medicare, Medicaid here, every safety net that you're going to now drug test somebody, God forbid that they need, there's a pattern that we've seen in the last year, which is what it is. Your perspective from what you've seen.
Well, I would agree with the point that maybe this is going to galvanize everyone, because to come together and get it together and vote. What did President Obama tell us? He toured for, I believe, 48 hours in a row with Hillary Clinton in the final days of the election. He said, "My legacy is on the line. Your life depends on getting out to vote." We stay home. Now we're dealing with the consequences of it, okay? And we're going to pay. We're all going to pay tremendously, because when you look at the sleeping giant of the black vote, what just happened with the election of Doug Jones down in Alabama, the president and his party has been saying for years, we have got to find a way to stop this sleeping giant that goes overwhelmingly to Democrats of the black vote. And they are not going to rest, whether it's legislatively, judiciously, in the courts, until they find a way, you got to show us your driver's license. And it reminds you of all the movies, where black people in the 50s had to show their driver's license and then go through a test, an intelligence test for the right to vote. So I wanted to return to your original question. That's one of the things that scares me the most, that the president is just cutting back. This is a guy that I just don't know anymore.
So there was another comment that was reported with multiple sources, where when he was talking about cutting back one of the safety net programs, somebody pointed out to him that more than half of the recipients were white and from the red states overwhelmingly. And he says who? I think that there's a belief that's been reported widely here that there's a misunderstanding as to who in this country uses this safety net. And sure, you want to tweak it, you want to change it. We've had workfare that's replaced welfare and reforms, and nobody says everything's perfect right now. But there's an indiscriminateness to this that's just, again, comes back to what we started off with the program. What's really behind all this stuff that makes it ugly? But to me, Reverend, also, the idea that we keep making it harder to vote. Now, we saw a ruling that in North Carolina, they're going to be taking a look again at these gerrymandered districts, and that could have a significant impact. And there's other cases right now that are reviewing this as well. But again, I'm going to get to a little bit later in the program what's being said, not just from the pulpit and from the flock, but I'm curious, is there a sense that a lot's changed in the last year, or that a lot might change going forward?
I think that I heard two things from the panelists. I heard hope and I heard fear and maybe apathy in approaching voting, as Dominic was sharing. I think that there's a multitude of emotions going on and very little strategy that's taking place, as the chief identified. They're afraid, but they're not sure what they're afraid of. They want to hold on to a hope, but they don't know what that hope is going to look like in what appears to be a hopeless scenario. And so I think that the best response I can give you is we're in a time of uncertainty. And unfortunately, the uncertainty of making America great again seems to be aimed in one direction. And that direction would be the minority community. That direction would be programs that benefit both whites and blacks, but harm blacks disproportionately.
When we come back, President Trump's now infamous comments about Haitians and Africans, they've had a few days to sink in. We're going to take a look at reaction from the community and how the conversations are going. I'll go around the table. The conversations, whether they be at a conference Dominic was at, a precinct house, at a pulpit, and more. Stay with us. We'll be right back.